This is CNN Money Switzerland, and we are providing you continued coverage of the coronavirus spread in Switzerland and the rest of Europe. I'm Ana Maria Montero. Switzerland has announced a further 32 billion Swiss francs in aid for business and workers hit by the coronavirus outbreak in what is the largest stimulus package in the history of the Confederation. The package is in addition to the 10 billion committed so far and includes 20 billion in short-term loans for Switzerland's small to medium-sized companies. The government has also banned gatherings of more than 5 people, which will be punishable with a fine, stopping short of complete confinement. The county's civil protection will also be drafted in to help cantons with their efforts. I'm joined now by Gero Jung. He is coming to us from Geneva, Mirabeau Asset Management. Gero, thank you so much for being with us. A really monumental, historic day for Switzerland.
Sure, some big measures that were announced today. Of course, Switzerland, as a small open economy, is really submitted to this shock, to this global recession that we're likely to face, but also to weaker domestic demand because the businesses are shutting down.
Absolutely. Now, the Federal Council in the press conference said that the country is running at 80%. I mean, when you look around and you see empty offices, empty streets, I mean, that seems wildly optimistic, no?
Sure. We also see the official forecast by the Swiss Ministry for the Economy that were revised down quite significantly. And actually, the SECO now expects a recession of about 1.5% this year. This contrasts to a previous forecast of 1.3%. So we do see already some significant downturn included in the forecast, including in official forecasts.
And this total, so now we're looking at a total of 42 billion, more or less, in stimulus. I mean, if you think that every month, just wages alone average about 30 billion, and that doesn't even take into account the gig economy, does it seem like anywhere near enough?
Sure. I think when we look at this from an international perspective, 42 billion corresponds to about 5% of Switzerland's GDP. So it's quite sizable, actually. I mean, Germany promised about 4% as of today, and France about 3%. So this current package of 42 billion is actually quite significant. Second point I took away is that money is quickly at disposal of those who need it. Mm-hmm. That is also something quite important. And the last point: there's no big administrative burden put on SMEs in Switzerland to get access to some emergency funding.
Okay, and to your point, so the SMEs get about 20 billion, right? But the credit lines are about at 10% of their revenue, as I understand it. I mean, if you take into account that many businesses don't start really turning a real profit until the third year, more or less, that also doesn't feel like enough.
Sure, but these are the first measures. This is a phase one package, I guess. Like in the US, we're likely to see further measures. And depending on when this pandemic will really reach its peak and when things improve on the health issue side.
Now, did they say anything today that struck you, surprised you, or was this more along the lines where you expected?
I guess some people expected a lockdown similar to neighboring countries here, which didn't happen. But the fact that assemblies of more than 5 people or unions of more than 5 people are prohibited now is quite some significant policy measure, I guess.
Now, earlier you mentioned, we were talking a little bit about the distribution of the funds, and now the people would be able to get that money easily somehow, the SMEs, et cetera. I mean, now all the burden of distribution falls on the banks.
Yeah, sure. But again, my understanding is that the administrative burden is really easy. And the finance minister even mentioned that by one entrepreneur just going to the bank in the next half an hour, he would have funds available. So this all should be quite helpful for the short term. In other issues, we also see that, for example, what helped Switzerland a lot during the last big crisis, the last recession about 10 years ago, was the fact that we do have some automatic stabilizers. So we do have, for example, companies and employers that come back to short-term work, which really helps to cushion this very negative shock, this negative impact on the Swiss labor market. And also, if we look, for example, at the official forecast by SECO, the unemployment rate is going up, of course, this year to about 2.8%. Currently, we have about 2.4%, but it's not a very significant, it's not mass unemployment that we can expect in Switzerland, because we do have some automatic stabilizers. Aid is coming, a fiscal package is coming. Liquidity is not really an issue for banks. Big banks and other banks are very solid, and this will certainly help to overcome this crisis.
Now, earlier you mentioned the slowdown, not only globally, but also in the Swiss economy, recession. I think you even used the word. How long do you think this could go on?
It's a big question. As an economist, it always depends, is a shock temporary or more permanent or more structural? For the time being, I think the current shock, it's a severe health issue shock, but it's also likely to be more of a temporary nature. So similar in a way to some natural disasters or to 9/11, 2001 in the US, and there the shock was of more temporary nature. We do not have a liquidity crisis, at least not yet, in Switzerland or in America or in other countries, that really puts a lot of pressures on banks, and no bank for the time being has gone bankrupt. And let's hope that it won't happen.
And on this subject of the liquidity crisis, is the central bank doing enough? They're not really stepping in.
Well, they already announced a measure. They did not change interest rates, as you know, yesterday, but they did increase this exception threshold for certain banks. So on this side, there is some aid coming forward for banks. It can be estimated that this the negative interest rate easing that the SNB decided yesterday, starting on April the 1st, will ease the burden of about 600 million Swiss francs on banks in Switzerland.
All right, so what could you see as some of the next steps that will be taken here?
I think the $1 billion question is really, when will we see a peak? When will the second derivative of new cases turn negative? That's what we all financial markets economists are looking for. We do see some encouraging data, for example, not only from China, but also, for instance, from South Korea. But that's really the $1 billion question. And only then more fiscal measures, we think, will be forthcoming and will be useful.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time tonight, Guido. It was a pleasure, and for your insights. Stay safe.
Thank you.
All right, now for a look at those markets, which, after gaining ground this morning, were back in jumpy territory after central banks and governments around the world unleashed a torrent of stimulus measures designed to cushion the shock from coronavirus. After weeks of steep declines, Peter Aluwalia, Chief Investment Officer at Swiss Partners, tells my colleague Hannah Wise why you should buy the dip.
I say, look, you should definitely start. I'm taking the leap of faith in the global equity fund that I manage, and I think this is the right thing to do. Look, if you can find a company on under 2 times earnings with a double-digit dividend yield, with a significant amount of cash on its balance sheet and very little debt, you know, how can you go wrong over a 6 or a 12-month period? Now, you may not get the exact intraday timing wrong, but I think the rewards will be huge on the other side.
And you're saying this even though coronavirus has not yet hit with full force the United States. I mean, markets will plunge then.
Well, haven't they plunged already? Is one question. Look, if I look at the intraday movements on various asset classes, be that some individual stocks, you're seeing a 25% movement on a daily basis. There is no way on earth that a company's profits go up and down 25% daily. How can oil move 20% daily? This is people, speculators, stabbing in the dark, you know, absolutely fear, not knowing what to do. I have a view, and I don't mean to scare anybody, but what I think could happen is I think China has set the precedent how to deal with this virus. I believe we're actually not far away from some treatments. I've seen medical evidence on that. The harsh reality is, and I don't mean to be mean, but on a percentage basis, it's not that lethal. I have underestimated it, though, in some ways, because from the people who've recovered, what I've been reading is that 30% well, 30% of your lung capacity is damaged. So for someone who's a smoker like me, that's not wonderful news, but most people will recover. What governments have decided to do, even though the percentage rate is low, they have very much decided that this number of deaths are just unpalatable. So they have to do whatever it takes.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but what kind of impact has that had? I mean, how do you rate this crisis? How shocking has it been for the industry in comparison to other crises?
I think this is the worst crisis that I've ever seen in my life. No one has ever been through this. The speed of it, the fear, the emotion, the panic. For me, look, I think several things could very well happen. Do not be surprised. Look, China is now back online, which is great, and they are getting back to work, maybe 70 to 85%, so that helps. We are probably already in a recession everywhere else, maybe coming out of it in China, and by the way, they're going to do huge stimulus in China. How do you stop this virus? Well, you have to lock everything down. So we should be prepared at some point in time that maybe in the Western world and other parts of the world, we have a lockdown for a month or two. And we will get our basic food, necessities, petrol, life will go on. Maybe markets will be closed. That would be a healthy thing, because I think a lot of people have lost money because of short-term speculation and panic, which is not healthy.
Do you think that we'll see markets close when coronavirus really hits the United States?
I think it's already there. It's just nobody's been tested. So they've been in a period of denial, but the right thing to do would be just shut everything down, close down markets, and we can have a philosophical argument about whether that's good or bad. Get rid of the virus, suppress it, which I think is entirely possible, and China has showed us the way on that. I think we're months away from some kind of treatment on coronavirus from what I've seen already. And you know what will happen the other side? Unless governments spend big now, the bill the other side is going to be terrible. But when we get through this, which we actually will, what will happen is you're going to see a huge V-shaped recovery, and probably the biggest bounce in markets that's ever been recorded in history, because you must not underestimate human psychology and sentiment. If we're all locked away for a month or 2 months, what's going to happen? We're going to go out and we're going to party big time, and money will be for free. I'm already seeing deals in the US on leasing of trucks, 0% interest, 7 years, 4 months payments taken care of. Everybody is going to upgrade because they're going to feel that they just got through a life-changing experience.
So which sectors might you want to dabble in if you were tempted?
I would avoid any of the safe areas. That, I think, is completely the wrong instinct and what everybody is telling you to do now. I think that ship has sailed. So don't buy supermarket stocks, because look, at the end of the day, when we come through this, and we will come through this stronger than ever, I have no doubt about that at all in my mind, what are you going to do with 1,000 rolls of toilet paper? I mean, you're not going to go to the supermarket again. So sure, Wall Street and all the analysts will tell you this is what to buy. It's wrong. I would buy things like cyclical stocks. I'd look at some of the commodity stocks. I know it sounds very counterintuitive. I would also look at the auto sector. I would maybe look at luxury goods. And that's
what about airline
psychology.
stocks? What about airlines?
I think it's risky, but you're going to need them. Look, they're going to be bailed out. Maybe not all of them, but definitely the flag carriers. You're going to need them going forward. People, I expect actually a travel boom after this. I know, again, that sounds crazy, but now if you've been stuck at home, not being out of your borders and so on, people are going to want to live life to a much higher level than they've done before. And they're going to have a lot of money saved because they've not been able to go to the shops except for buying basic goods. So there's going to be a lot of firepower by the consumer.
What about central bank monetary policy? What do you expect from them in the coming weeks?
I expect much more. This is just the small wave of a huge tsunami that's coming our way. This, of course, could cause further problems. Look, the very worst end game could be something like MMT. modern monetary theory. I would be wary of government bonds now. I don't believe they're a safe haven. I think your ultimate safe haven now is actually individual companies and possibly gold. And why do I say individual companies? Yes, the price may go up and down, but if you buy a company with a good balance sheet, good cash flows, so what if you lose 2 months of production or even 3 months? There are 12 months in a year, and look at the years going forward. So, some companies, share price has gone down 60 or 70%. I know the business has not changed by that much. Otherwise, employees would have been laid off. So, for me, this is probably, as an equity investor, the best opportunity I've ever seen in my life. The bargains are absolutely incredible. Doesn't mean they can't get cheaper in the short term, but I think in 6 months or a bit longer or a bit less, I see companies where you can make 5 times your money. I mean, that's the same kind of volatility as buying a call option. Every equity has now turned into a call option effectively.
All right, we'll leave it there. Peter Ahluwalia, thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure. Thank you, Hannah.
Okay, we're joined now by Rudolf Menchie, he's the chief economist at Economie Suisse, joining us via Skype. Hello, Rudolf. Great to see you tonight. Just coming off the back of this package, I have to ask you, what about buying the dip? Would you buy the dip?
Yes, definitely.
All right. Straight shooter. No thoughts about that one. Okay, let's jump into this press conference that we heard this afternoon. I understand that Economie Suisse is very much supporting what we've seen, but the Federal Council did say that the country is running at 80%. I mean, again, when you look at empty streets and offices, I mean, that really sounds very optimistic, no?
It is quite optimistic, but most of the businesses are still running as we do, as you do, and the whole production facilities are not at 100% speed, but the production goes ahead in the pharmaceutical sector, in the banking industry, insurances, and so on. The whole retail is closed, yes, indeed, but many other sectors are running not at 100% level, but quite good.
And the Swiss watches? Also not quite.
The watch industry has been hit very strongly by the outbreak of the corona crisis. The demand has been reduced severely, and we're hoping that this will turn into a better condition next year or second half of this year, that we see some rebound effect in the industry also with new innovative products.
All right, back to the press conference then. So a total of 42 billion. Is this enough?
It's the tradition in Switzerland not to announce a huge amount of money and then not knowing where to spend the money. They're really going step by step, and I think this is exactly the right decision to do. They are focusing on the next couple of weeks, especially the severe situation of many enterprises to go illiquid. This would be an enormous problem, but with the measures taken today, we can stabilize the economy. And what is the right decision in 2, 3, 4 weeks' time ago, nobody knows at the moment yet. So it's better to make clear decisions, smart decisions, but not a super bazooka.
A super bazooka. What would be a super bazooka for you? The 100 million fund that was proposed earlier this week by other prominent economists?
Yeah.
A billion, excuse me. 100 billion.
My 2 colleagues has proposed this 100 billion bazooka. I do not think that this is really helpful, to announce such huge sums, because this creates a lot of expectations in Switzerland that they are getting a lot of money for free from the government, and this should not be the case, because we have to focus on those enterprises that are solid and only hit by the corona crisis, but have a business on a stable ground.
Well, then if we look across the Atlantic and we see what's happening in the U.S., I mean, they have $1 trillion measures put in place. So somehow, by comparison, it seems like maybe the Swiss aren't doing enough.
As I come back to the same issue, it's really important to do now the thing we can do now, and not to announce a bazooka and nobody knows how to spend the money.
All right. I hear you, but now is 42 billion, right? But 30 billion is already what salaries would cost in a month here in Switzerland. You've already gone 30. So 42 is only going to make it. How far is that going to go? In how much time?
The second, besides the supportive effect of today's media press release, has been that there will be no further restrictions for businesses in general. And this is an extremely important information that we can produce in Switzerland like we have done in the last couple of weeks, even though it's quite difficult. But without this level of production, the costs would increase tremendously, and therefore the measures taken today is right. We're going to produce services and products in Switzerland also during the crisis time, and we are supporting for those enterprises that have severe problems in that crisis spheres.
All right. So as I understand it now, companies can go to their banks, right? And the banks will be the ones who will now take over the job of distributing this support.
Exactly. So the focus lies on those enterprises who have difficulties to pay their bills because their customers delay their payments. And in that situation, this could create a negative chain in the whole economy. And by providing liquidity to the small and medium enterprises, especially, this negative chain reaction can be interrupted. And this is an important measure to stabilize the economy at this phase.
And so now you're going to see much more credit being extended and people taking out more loans and incurring more debt, possibly. Is this the best way forward?
The critical question is that only those enterprises get the credits which are also we can survive in a longer time period. So those enterprises that have already huge difficulties before the crisis has started, probably it's better not to give the credit anymore, that they die, and only those enterprises should be supported which are able to survive in the future.
So it sounds like the banks will really be in the seat to make the decisions about who's going to get what.
Exactly, but they have to pay also 50% in case of a bankruptcy. So they are quite aware of not spending the money out for free, but to have a close eye on the balance sheet of the enterprises.
And if we look forward, Rudolf, there is, of course, lots of talk about the global slowdown, inevitable, even here in Switzerland. Recession is even being discussed. How do you see it?
Probably we have no chance anymore to have no recession. So my expectation is that we are going not only in a mild recession in the next 2 quarters, they will be quite severe. And then there should be some rebound effect by the end of this year. It depends strongly what's going on the front of the corona crisis, whether this rebound takes place or not. In case of a rebound effect in the 4th quarter, the downturn would be not that severe, but in case of a prolonged crisis, there would be really severe influence on the whole economy, not only in Switzerland, but worldwide.
We could see that maybe dragging potentially on into the middle of next year, as you say, if there's no rebound by the end of the year.
I think it's really... we are speculating about what nobody has a clue about it. in a positive phase, there will be some new drugs coming around, and then the whole system will be stabilized immediately, and the rebound effect will be strong. People want to go to holidays, want to spend their time with friends in the restaurants and so on. As soon as there is a solution like that, the rebound effect will be quite heavy and positive.
All right. Well, thank you, Rudolf, for joining us tonight and for your insights. Always a pleasure.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
And in other related news this Friday, EasyJet said it will be grounding most of its fleet as of Tuesday next week as widespread travel bans bring the world's airline industry to a halt. The budget airline said it will continue to operate rescue flights, but expects most of these to be completed by Monday. Other airlines, including Swiss and Ryanair, have similarly grounded parts of their fleet. The number of deaths from COVID-19 has now reached over 10,000 worldwide, according to Johns Hopkins University. Its researchers say the virus has infected more than 246,000 people globally. Around 86,000 of those have recovered. In Italy, deaths from the coronavirus pandemic have now surpassed China's. The country of 60 million has recorded more than 3,400 deaths. That's about 150 more than in China, a country with a population over 20 times larger. Health authorities say one reason the toll is so high in Italy is the large population of elderly. More than 80% of those who have died were over 70 years old. And YouTube says it will reduce its streaming quality in the European Union and the UK to avert internet gridlock during the coronavirus crisis. The EU's Internal Market Commissioner has urged streaming platforms to cut the quality of their videos to prevent internet overload, with so many people staying at home. Netflix announced plans to reduce its streaming quality yesterday. Now you will have seen and probably shared many videos and memes of people juggling their work and their kids at home this past week. But with school out for who knows how long, helping them keep up with their education becomes no easy task. I caught up with an expert on the topic to get her tips for how best to manage homeschooling. Okay.
My first step is to schedule. Make sure you have a schedule in place. If your children were sent home with a variety of subjects to do, I recommend taking the subjects that they can learn independently and putting those for an independent block of time during the day that they can work on. And then to find out what subjects they need your one-on-one help with, and find what works with your schedule and say, okay, from 10 to 10:30 or 10 to 11, I'm going to be one-on-one with this child. If you have multiple children, I have my children look after the other ones while I'm one-on-one with a particular child.
Oh, okay.
So I have a 5-year-old at home. So if while I'm helping Kate over here, one of my other children will be looking after my 5-year-old. So make sure you have a schedule for the day that works for your family. It will really help to keep things flowing.
All right. And as I understand it, next on your list is chores. This is housework and things like this.
It's housework, and it's looking after the family. If they're not sick, then they can do a chore. They can they can clean their bedroom. They can help with lunch. Every time we eat, you need to have someone to set the table, someone to do the dishes, someone to sweep under the table after lunch. After dinner, they can do a chore as well. It's part of our everyday routine. It'll keep your house semi-clean, but it will also keep them busy and productive. And they know that they're contributing to the family.
And an important part of that, I think, is this chore chart that you actually also recommend. So everybody knows exactly what they're doing and when.
It is. Mine is posted in our kitchen. So the children all know when they sit down to eat, they can look, okay, who's setting the table, who's doing dishes today.
All right. Is there like a reward system set up with this, or is this just something that they know they have to do, period?
It's part of being in the family.
Okay. All right. So what would be next on your list then?
Next, to keep you sane, is to create a meal plan for your family. I simply write mine down in my day planner, but find out what you're going to cook for lunch and what you're going to serve for dinner so that you're not caught just not organized. And if you have an older child, see if they can help to cook a lunch for you so that you can maybe spend some time with one of your other children that you need to help with their math. Hot dogs, yep, anything that's easy that they might be able to prepare is wonderful. But just know what's coming in terms of your family meals.
And then we've got, I think you close with, oh no, wait, you've also got creating quiet time for everyone? Talk to me about quiet time. Why is this important?
Oh, because as mothers or as parents, we just need a moment where there's not a lot of chaos going around and we can just quiet our minds. So what we try to do is spend at least 30 minutes every day with just a period of time that's just quiet. They're either reading in their bedroom or they're coloring quietly or doing Legos quietly in the corner for 30 minutes so that there's not chaos running around. It just resets the family.
I think that's just another layer, another new dynamic for people that are now being forced to work from home and then also have the children working from home. I mean, it feels almost impossible to do. How do you make that happen?
It feels impossible to do, but it is possible if you just take control of the household. Pretend you're the CEO of your home. So create your schedule, find when you want quiet and peace so that you can refocus on the day's tasks ahead. Make sure you've got your meal plans ready. And my last point is to enforce the rules. So if the children aren't finishing their school, don't reward them with a screen. Give them an extra chore if they don't finish their schoolwork. There's no dessert for dinner if they didn't finish their schoolwork. And then maybe provide an incentive. If they do everything correct and get everything done, give them a little extra dessert. Just something to keep the family moving, and they know that they have a general schedule they have to follow every day and expectations.
And what about, you mentioned quiet time in general, but what about downtime for the parents?
Oh.
When do you find that? How do you do that?
That I recommend with a glass of wine at the end of the day after you've tucked the last child into bed.
All right, well, that sounds like some pretty healthy advice. Thank you so much, Jackie, for your time, for your insights, and for your tips.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Remember, you can always get involved in this week's news via our social media pages, so Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, you name it. And of course, we always want to hear from you, so do stay in touch. Let us know what you're thinking. And don't forget that you can see this and the rest of our content on our website, cnnmoney.ch. Now, on behalf of the entire team, we'd like to thank you for joining us, but we also urge you to please stay inside if you don't need to go out, wash those hands, and mind your social distance. Thanks again for joining us, and we'll see you next week.